From the News Channel 5 network, this is Urban Outlook.
Welcome to Urban Outlook. My name's Andrea Klein-Thomas. I'm filling in for April Eaton. We've got a really interesting show planned for you today. We're going to be talking about the National Urban League's 38th annual State of Black America report. I've got it right here. It says, One Nation Underemployed, Jobs Rebuild America. We're joined by our local president and CEO of the Urban League of Middle Tennessee, Patricia Stokes. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrea.
We've got so much to talk about here.
Yes.
This is chock full of information. But first, explain what this report is to those that are unfamiliar with it.
Well, the State of Black America is a report that's published by the National Urban League's Washington Bureau, which is our office in Washington, D.C. And generally, each year, we pick some topics that we think are of critical importance to the African American community to discuss in essays. And then there has always been an index included that shows how African Americans are doing in key areas: employment, wealth, health, entrepreneurship. So those were some key areas that are generally featured in this index, and how we do in comparison to the white population. This year there's also an Hispanic index that has been included.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Just kind of generally speaking, talk about some of the comparisons, because for many people you hear, oh, the recession is over, things are picking up, things are great, but it shows for the African American community specifically that there's still a long way to go.
Well, I think we've always recognized that even before the recession, there was a huge gap in employment, underemployment, unemployment, particularly in certain African American communities. I remember a study a couple of years ago that we did here in Nashville that showed that in certain neighborhoods in North Nashville, we had unemployment rates upwards of 30%. So you don't often see that in some of the unemployment numbers that you get through your regular sources. So what this index does is sort of, this year's index in particular, it looks at how we are doing post-recession. And I think some of the important messages that we find nationally are that even though there has been growth for certain populations, for other populations we continue to lag behind. And it continues to create particular challenges for us coming out of the recession.
And what are the reasons why? What are the contributing factors to that?
Well, I think there are a number of factors. I think that the changing job market is a huge issue, and as certain industries go down and there's more of a demand for more increased employment and more skill training and those kinds of things, we kind of fall out of the market in that way. I think even in the way that we look for jobs now, that is a critical factor. Everything is in an online environment. So the way that we used to seek and look for employment and have the opportunity to make a person-to-person impression on an employer, that is not necessarily how it happens. You have to begin in an online environment where no one else, where the person does not see or know you, and you have to know how to leverage your resources and your people to sort of give you access to those employers in a different way, so that you can have the person-to-person contact. And then, of course, in some of our neighborhoods where unemployment is persistent, you're just not included in the numbers. So you don't get a full picture of what the employment looks like in a particular community where people have persistently been unemployed.
Because these are numbers that we don't normally see, how does the Urban League kind of gather the numbers? Well,
there are a number of surveys that we do. The policy office, well, now the Washington Bureau, they have opportunities to look at and interview with different people in different communities to find out exactly what's happening in those communities as it relates to unemployment.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but usually the numbers are compared to African American statistics are compared to white Americans, but now we've got Latinos and Hispanics in the mix. Talk about the comparison between African Americans and Latinos.
We're fairly close in terms of the losses and gains, and I think you'll see that in the index. I know locally we do a lot in education, so we're often, the African American and Latino population are often voicing some of the same concerns as it relates to access, as it relates to opportunity gaps. So I think that is reflected in these indexes as well.
And Nashville, how are we, because I know this looks at the whole country, but Nashville, how are we doing here in Middle Tennessee?
Well, based on this index, in terms of unemployment, we are ranked number 4, meaning that there is a lower disparity in unemployment between African Americans and whites based on this index. Interestingly enough, however, after you look at the index further and you look at income equality, we're number 44. So the picture is not as bright. I mean, people may be working, but the wages are not as comparable. Of course, that doesn't put us like 144 on the list, but it's still significant, I think, that there is that disparity.
Why is that, though?
Again, I think where the opportunities are and where we're able to access full employment and full opportunity in the workplace, I think there are just disparities there. You know, we had Randall Pinkett on Saturday, and he talks about, you know, the differences, black faces and white places, so to speak. So, you know, how we are able to access those positions and opportunities that pay very well, as opposed to maybe those that are on the lower strata of the income index.
So is it as you move up the ladder, there are just fewer opportunities available?
Not necessarily available, but that we are able to access on a more equitable basis.
Right. And so is there talk about how to change that?
Well, I think we continue to push. I think as a movement, we continue to push. And I think making the information available, sort of putting it in the faces of folks so that there is not this illusion that things are better than they really are, is one step in that direction. And then on a local level, you know, trying to figure out where we position ourselves so that we can leverage the best opportunities and that we are in line with, you know, where the better jobs are in terms of for getting employment. Sorry.
So, you know, you talk about unemployment, but there's also underemployment.
Absolutely.
What does that mean?
That means that you get a master's degree and you come into the employment market and you're not really able to leverage an opportunity that equals the value of your educational experience or your skills. You're downsized. You were in a corporate job that paid you 6 figures, and you come back into the market and you're not able to leverage an opportunity that keeps you at that level. You're taking wages that are far below what you are accustomed to earning. Or you, for whatever reason, lose employment and you find yourself working multiple part-time jobs to keep going. So all of that equals underemployment.
And those numbers are much higher.
Are much higher, yes. Are
much higher. And so, you know, how do you, or how does the Urban League altogether use all of this information?
So, you know, at the national level, you'll hear about the Urban Jobs Act. So our national president and CEO, Mark Morial, is very active in Washington, D.C., and working very hard to influence policies at that level that deal with training and employment and training opportunities, particularly for underrepresented populations. So the work is there in terms of identifying resources that can support the training and job building needs and opportunities that we have in the local communities.
Okay, fantastic. Patricia Stokes is going to stay with us. We're going to talk about, when we come back, kind of what people can do, the resources that are available to kind of change these numbers, so just stay with us.